Something moved on the moon, and the official story doesn't quite add up. On April 1st, 2026, a rocket called the Space Launch System lifted 4 astronauts off Launch Complex 39B in Florida, aimed them at the only other world a human has ever walked on, and let them go. Reid Wiseman in command. Victor Glover at the pilot's seat. Christina Koch and Jeremy Hansen rounding out the crew. Their spacecraft, an Orion capsule they had named Integrity, would carry them on a loop around the far side of the moon, set a new record for the farthest human beings had ever been from Earth, and bring them home 10 days later for a splashdown off the coast of San Diego. The mission was officially a triumph, the first crewed lunar flight since 1972. The press celebrated, the administrator gave a speech, and somewhere in the middle of all that polished public messaging, a frame from one of Integrity's external cameras allegedly captured something nobody was prepared to talk about. A bright object against the lunar surface, small, discrete, and in 3 consecutive images, in 3 different positions. This is the story of those frames, what people are saying about them, and why, after 54 years of staying away, we suddenly decided we could not wait any longer to come back. Let's establish a baseline first. The moon is not what you were taught it was. For most of the 20th century, the official line was clean. A bone-dry, geologically dead rock. A pockmarked museum frozen since the early solar system. Apollo had been there. We had the rocks. The case was closed. Almost none of that is still true. In 2009, a probe called L-Cross slammed into a crater near the South Pole and confirmed something most textbooks still refuse to print. The moon is wet. There is water ice locked into permanently shadowed craters in quantities large enough to matter. In 2020, the Sophia Observatory detected water molecules on the sunlit surface, places where it shouldn't physically be able to survive. India's Chandrayaan-3 landed near the South Pole in 2023 and returned data suggesting the soil itself is laced with hydrogen. China's Chang'e-5 brought back samples in 2020 containing tiny glass beads that act like sponges, soaking up hydrogen from the solar wind and releasing it on a cycle. The moon has a water cycle. The textbook was wrong. The strangeness goes further. Transient lunar phenomena, called TLPs, are flashes, glows, and color changes on the lunar surface that have been reported by professional astronomers for more than 400 years. This is not a fringe internet topic. The European Space Agency has actively studied them. The reports describe pinpricks of light flaring on the far side of the terminator, reddish hazes that drift and fade, glows that linger for minutes near specific craters. Aristarchus, Plato, Grimaldi. The same names recur in telescope logs across centuries. Nobody has a clean explanation. Outgassing of trapped lunar gases is the leading theory. Micrometeorite impacts kicking up dust is another. Both are probably part of the answer. Neither covers everything. This is the world Integrity flew into. The Artemis 2 mission profile was simple by design. No landing, no surface walk. The crew would loop around the far side, pass within roughly 4,070 miles of the surface at closest approach, and head home. Inside the flight plan, NASA scheduled a 7-hour lunar observation period. Pairs of astronauts rotating to the windows in turn, each pair given roughly 55 to 85 minutes of dedicated viewing time. Memory. Think about who those eyes belong to. Reid Wiseman, a former Navy test pilot who has commanded missions to the International Space Station. Christina Koch, who set the record for the longest single spaceflight by a woman. Victor Glover, a former combat aviator and SpaceX Dragon pilot. Jeremy Hansen, a fighter pilot trained to identify aircraft and threats at long range in difficult lighting. These are not casual observers. These are people whose entire careers have been built on noticing things other people miss. Whatever they saw clearly. The cameras on the outside of the spacecraft, 4 of them mounted on the solar array wings, were primarily designed for engineering, watching the panels deploy. monitoring the burn signatures of the engines. They were also pointed at the moon during the closest approach. Each solar array gave Integrity a wingspan of about 63 feet when fully extended, and the cameras at the tips returned imagery so sharp that the lunar regolith filled the frame in startling detail. NASA released a curated set of those images during and after the mission. The footage was breathtaking, the cratered grayscale wasteland sliding past the windows. Earthrise from a vantage point no human had occupied since 1972. Astronauts pinching the Earth between their gloved fingers, jokes traded over the comm loop, the whole story told as a clean human triumph. Then there is what is not in any official release, but is being talked about in every space forum, every conspiracy community, and an unsettling number of mainstream comment sections. According to multiple anonymous accounts circulating online, one of the wingtip cameras captured a sequence over the lunar far side that never made it into any public archive. The accounts describe roughly 9 seconds of footage. The terrain is a rough, shadowed plateau somewhere in the broad region of the South Pole Aitken Basin, the largest and oldest impact crater in the solar system. The lighting is harsh, low-angle sunlight cutting across a landscape that has not meaningfully changed in 2 billion years. Then, across 3 consecutive frames, a small bright object sits in 3 different positions. Not a streak, not a smear, a discrete object moving across the surface, casting its own short shadow. Let's be honest about what this could be. It could be debris from the spacecraft itself drifting in the foreground, parallax tricking the eye into placing it on the ground. It could be a hot pixel cluster. It could be a reflection off the camera housing. It could be a single frame artifact, misinterpreted by people who badly want it to be something more. The history of UFO sightings on the moon is mostly a history of pareidolia, the human tendency to see faces in clouds and ships in shadows. The Shard, the Tower, the bridge in Mare Crisium. Almost every one of these has been resolved with better imaging into ordinary geology or imaging glitches. That is the easy explanation. The easy explanation doesn't account for everything. The accounts of the alleged Integrity frames are not the first time astronauts have reported seeing something they couldn't identify near the moon. Buzz Aldrin has said publicly that during the Apollo 11 outbound flight, the crew watched a bright object pacing them through the dark. He has also, very carefully, attributed it to one of the 4 panels that had jettisoned earlier in the mission. The boring answer, probably the right one, but notice the framing. He felt the need to explain it on the record, decades later, repeatedly. In 1971, the Apollo 14 crew reported a bright flash on the lunar surface during their descent. Houston could not confirm any natural source. The transcript is public. You can read it yourself. Edgar Mitchell, who walked on the moon during that same mission, spent the rest of his life publicly insisting that humanity is not alone and that governments are aware of it. He was not a fringe figure, he was the 6th man to walk on another world. He took that conviction to his grave. The dismissive version says, "These are old men chasing relevance." The skeptical version says, "They were trained engineers and scientists who had stood on another celestial body and looked back at Earth, and that maybe they earned the right to be taken seriously." So, when Artemis 2 goes up, the most heavily instrumented crewed lunar mission in history, with cameras good enough to resolve features as small as a parked car from orbit, and someone close to the program allegedly leaks 9 seconds of impossible footage, the public reaction is not skepticism. It is exhaustion, a kind of course. Of course the cameras saw something. Of course we are not being shown all of it. You don't have to believe in little green men to find the pattern suspicious. You just have to follow the timeline. For half a century, we treated returning to the moon as a low priority. Apollo wound down. Budgets got cut. Plans for lunar bases were drawn up, presented, applauded, and shelved across multiple administrations. The moon was finished business. Then, sometime in the last 15 years, every major spacefaring power changed its mind at once. The United States, China, India, Russia, Japan, Israel, the European Space Agency, and a half-dozen private companies are now actively pursuing the moon. Not flybys, permanent infrastructure, bases at the South Pole, mining rights, communication relays. China has stated, on the record, that they intend to have a crewed lunar base in operation before 2035. The United States is racing to plant Artemis astronauts on the surface before they do. The official explanation is water. The polar ice is a resource, the argument goes, and whoever gets there first controls the most valuable territory off Earth. Water means rocket fuel. Rocket fuel means a staging point for Mars. Mars means everything. That story is true. It is also a little too clean. The polar ice has been known about, in rough form, since the 1990s. The water itself does not explain why every major spacefaring nation pivoted, in lockstep, within roughly the same 15-year window, after decades of indifference. Something else changed. The conspiratorial version says, "We found something." That the high-resolution mapping from missions like the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, Chang'e and Chandrayaan turned up anomalies that nobody wants to discuss publicly. Surface features that don't behave like geology. Heat signatures in places that should be dead cold. Magnetic anomalies that point to something buried under the regolith of the far side, where Earth-based telescopes cannot see. Some of that is real. The moon does have magnetic anomalies, particularly the swirls in places like Rhino Gamma, and nobody has a clean explanation for those either. The leading theory involves localized crustal magnetism and ancient impacts. The leading theory has been the leading theory for 30 years, and the swirls are still there, still weird, still mostly unexplained. The mainstream version says we are returning because we can, because the technology has matured, because China is pushing, because Mars is the long game and the moon is the practice run. Both versions can be true at once. This is where the alleged integrity frames matter. Not because 9 seconds of grainy footage prove anything. They don't. Even if every word of the leak is accurate, a moving, bright object on the moon could be 100 boring things. The frames do not constitute evidence of anything beyond a glitch in a camera. What they do is crystallize a feeling. The feeling that we are being told a sanitized version of a much weirder story. That the press releases describe an inspiring scientific endeavor while the actual data is being filtered, reviewed, and selectively released. The feeling that the people who actually went, the ones who spent 7 hours pressed to the windows of a spacecraft staring down at a world nobody has personally seen in over half a century, know something we don't. Maybe they don't. Maybe Reid Wiseman and his crew genuinely saw a beautiful dead rock and came home thrilled to have done it. Maybe the leaks are pure fabrication, a meme that grew legs because the timing was perfect. Maybe the next batch of Artemis missions will deliver clean, transparent surface imagery that puts every theory to bed. Or maybe they won't. Imagine you are an astronaut, 3 days out from Earth, looking down at a landscape that nobody has personally seen in living memory. You catch a glint of light where there shouldn't be one. You tell yourself it's a reflection. You tell mission control it's a reflection. You come home, get debriefed, sign the papers, and shake hands with the president on a stage in Houston. And for the rest of your life, every time someone asks you if there's anything else up there, you give the same answer Buzz Aldrin gave. You attribute it to the panel, because the alternative requires a conversation that humanity is not ready to have. Not yet. We're about to be ready, whether we like it or not. Artemis 3 is on the schedule. Boots on the South Pole. A landing site chosen specifically for its access to water ice and its proximity to the permanently shadowed craters, where the strangest readings have come from. After that, more missions, longer stays, eventually a permanent presence. The amount of time the moon spends being looked at closely by human eyes and human cameras is about to increase by orders of magnitude. If something has been moving up there, we are going to see it. The alleged integrity frames, whatever they actually are a preview, a 9-second tremor in a story that has been building for 60 years. They might be nothing. They might be the most important 9 seconds of footage in the history of the species. The honest answer, right now, today, is that nobody outside a very small circle knows for sure. What we do know is that the moon is no longer a closed book. It is a place where water moves, where the ground glows in the dark, where compasses pulse near ancient swirls, where flashes appear in the eyepieces of telescopes built by people who never expected to see anything at all. And now, for the first time in over half a century, we have sent humans back to look at it. Not for a weekend visit, for good. Whatever is up there, we are going to find it, or it is going to find us. The only question left is what the world looks like the morning after that announcement is finally made. The moon kept its secrets for a very long time. Its silence is almost over. And that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.